This Future Cities Africa episode is brought to you by the Greater Tygerberg Partnership. The Greater Tygerberg Partnership is a development facilitation agency charged with a mandate to unlock Bellville's potential as a sustainable, prosperous, and inclusive leading African city. Frank Cumming, Director for Urban Catalytic Investments at the City of Cape Town, is my guest today. We discuss the Bellville Future City and local spatial development framework Masterplan. Frank, welcome. It's great to have you on the show. Can you give us some background on your experience and your role at the City of Cape Town?
Hello, Daniel. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak around our Bellville Future City. My name is Frank Cumming. I'm the Director Urban Catalytic Investments in the City of Cape Town. Our department is located in the Economic Growth Directorate. I'm an urban regeneration practitioner. I'm approaching 30 years in the built environment. I have qualifications in property development and particularly property finance, real estate investment and finance. My background really is in large, complex, metropolitan scale regeneration projects. Historically, working overseas in the UK, I've been involved in Stratford City, which is the London 2012 Olympics, the Elephant and Castle regeneration, and then also at King's Cross. These developments are complex, multi-generational, infrastructure-led, and typically are developed in partnership between the public and the private sector, where the public sector typically provides land and a suite of enablement activities and incentives to try and attract private investment into service delivery. They typically also are residentially led, so they do include quite significant residential development. And because they're public-initiated projects, the public sector seeks to maximize the quantum of affordable housing as part of a broader mix. I returned to Cape Town in 2011, and I spent a few years working in the provincial regeneration program in the Department of Transport and Public Works. And there really was exposed to a number of projects in that directorate. In supporting province in achieving their program, including setting up the Conroddy Park project, which is a rather topical project which is underway currently.
Thanks, Frank. So how exactly do mega projects like the Bellville Future City vision impact on the sustainability of cities?
The sustainability of cities is a function of obviously economics, socioeconomic indicators and the like. And South Africa in particular, and Cape Town in particular, does face its own set of unique challenges in terms of inequality, the shortage of affordable housing, our transport mobility network, and the backbone, in particular rail, which is suffering, etc. Mega projects of the scale of Bellville Future City really afford the public sector and the city in particular to benefit from the economies of scale argument, where very significant opportunities for demand across different land uses can be deployed over a period of time, and that way reduce price points, improve, therefore, affordability. Given their scale, they can also attract a different range of stakeholders to project implementation, attracting capital and resources, human resources, and the like into these projects. So I think scale and the economies of scale is a very strong underpinning of the rationale behind undertaking these sort of mega projects. They also have a very significant opportunities given that they touch on so many different aspects of city life. I've touched on housing, for instance, but they're also very significant investments in mobility, in public amenity and services, and the like. They also tend to be multi-generational. In other words, they're not realized in a short period. They tend to be, achieved over decades. And I guess good examples of that in our local context is the V&A waterfront, for instance, and Century City, which still have very substantial bulk unrealized, and yet they've been in implementation for decades. And you think about those two assets, the V&A, one of the largest or most valuable assets in the Southern Hemisphere, let alone South Africa or African context. So even when the underlying values are there, the market has a particular ability to absorb, and that in turn, I think, is a function then of the rate at which development occurs. Academic commentators would speak to sustainability of cities in terms of compactness and inner city development. The likes of Bellville as the second metropolitan node of the city, we're promoting more compact forms of development. Compact cities are more competitive cities. They're ones that attract talent, capital, and investment. And in the redevelopment or the regeneration of Bellville, we are promoting more compact forms of development, more mixed use. And that in itself, we believe, is a more sustainable form of development than, let's say, prevailing forms of development, which tend to be mono-use dormitory towns, for instance. And Bellville, I think, realized has the potential, therefore, to reduce the demands on people needing to commute, to getting to and from work. They can literally live, work, and play in an urban setting, which is supportive of that. So, in terms of sustainability, the environmental aspect, therefore, is reduced congestion because fewer people are needing to commute, and all the associated benefits that come with that.
You've touched on the value that these mega projects bring to the table. What are the opportunities and correspondingly the challenges for the success or the failure of these kind of mega projects?
I think economies of scale and the critical importance of revitalizing our urban nodes offer many opportunities through the implementation of these projects. I've touched on justifying more compact forms means you get more efficiencies and effectiveness in terms of public infrastructure investment. There's less demand on reticulation services, for instance, because development is clustered around a geographically defined space. So you get fewer kilometers of pipes and wires in order to support or provide rather the capacity for these type of developments. So from a utility perspective, from a roads perspective, you also through these more compact urban forms that we're promoting through Bellville, you increasing the potential and the opportunity for non-motorized transport, cycling, pedestrian movements, higher utilization of amenity spaces, which warrants more investment in them and creating more significant investments in greener infrastructure, for instance. On the sustainability side, I think you will find globally that there's a move to achieve the global development goals and equally also the COP goals associated with carbon reduction and the like. So more compact urban forms place less reliance on fossil fuels, particularly through the reduced movement of people that are commuting, for instance, and the like. So those have positive spin-off, and those opportunities can be exploited. Indeed, economies of scale also offer the city, the public sector more generally, opportunities to invest in next generation infrastructure. So on-site renewables, for instance, and the generation of energy which supports the development can be justified more so because you have the argument of economies of scale. And equally, that principle would apply then across all the different utilities. So there are very significant opportunities that these type of developments offer, as opposed to urban sprawl as a conjunct. They do face very significant challenges, of course. To attract private investment into them, for instance, it's very difficult for the private sector to understand and to have a view on return on investment. And as a result, I think you will find that the public sector generally initiates these type of developments. They tend to have higher risk profiles initially, and the public sector can do a great deal in terms of mitigating risks and giving greater certainty, clarity, and consistency to planning, for instance, in terms of rezoning. In Bellville, for instance, with us busy promoting a local spatial development framework, it provides direction to landowners, to communities, to investors, property developers, the third sector, around the city's aspirations for a geographically defined space. In turn, we are in parallel also busy progressing a range of actions and activities to support market participation, de-risking transactions, giving more clarity, not just in terms of planning, but also progressing a framework around heritage and archaeology, for instance. We engage very closely with our colleagues in utility departments to ensure that the necessary capacity in road infrastructure, in the utility network, be it water, sanitation, etc., is available at the point in time at which we predict an uptake of demand warranting those investments. And that then will obviously provide investors and landowners and developers a better understanding and provide greater certainty around aspects of development which traditionally on a standalone basis are the risk that is borne by the private sector. So a lot more engagement, a lot more work being done by the city and our partners in progressing land assembly is another component which I think is very important. Intergovernmental relations. In Bellville, for instance, the core catalytic investment is around the public transport interchange. And you will note that we are proposing a vertically integrated scheme which incorporates all modes that operate to and from Bellville, be they rail, be they future BRT, be they existing GAB services, and then the road-based functions, in addition to all of the non-motorized transport, pedestrian, cycling, and public transport network that the city is seeking to promote here. So intergovernmental relations is also quite an important part in terms of co-planning, co-funding, and then land assembly in order to achieve certain transactions. So those are equally very critical opportunities for the city. They obviously present quite a significant challenge, of course. We operate in a very regulated space, a very densely regulated space. And the timing and the effort that's put into those type of initiatives is also one which typically is best undertaken by the public sector and the city leading in terms of land availability, for instance, and availability of grant and those type of aspects, which in turn all provide the greater certainty that I mentioned. And the certainty then translates into confidence ultimately. Confidence amongst the public sector, private sector rather, to undertake developments which otherwise they might not be attracted to because we are very focused on de-risking transactions. It provides opportunity for other players that currently lie outside of, let's say, the affordable housing space to participate at scale in development. So here we're thinking of institutional investors, the capital markets, and the like, that typically don't operate and invest in affordable housing and infrastructure in the inner city, for instance. The scale allows us to market make, if we structure transactions accordingly, and you'll find that is quite synonymous in the global best practice. And those are very exciting opportunities, but they obviously also present their own unique challenges.
Well, you've hinted at the role of partnerships to make this a reality. What's the role of partnerships between the public and the private sector in delivering projects of this scale?
I've alluded to the need for partnerships, and in fact, they're very necessary in order to successfully implement these sort of mega projects at scale. The scale of these projects means that the city can't necessarily undertake them on their own. They need to engage with a broad range of stakeholders, particularly in the public space, and particularly upfront in the early sort of periods of project conceptualization, pre-feasibility, scoping, conceptual work, in order to ensure alignment of various programs of government across the different spheres, provincial projects and national projects, and most importantly, I believe, is also the SOEs, and principally PRASA, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, but also Transnet and other SOEs that operate within the curtilage of the projects that we undertake. But in Bellville, we have two SOEs in PRASA because there's a rail station. It's the second busiest rail station in the city of Cape Town's rail network, measured in terms of boardings and alightings. And immediately south of it, there's a very significant complex called the Bellville Container Terminal, Inland Container Terminal, Belcon, which is Transnet facility. And there, in turn, we're obviously engaging with both of those parties in terms of the Bellville Future City and the role that they can play in the medium to longer term in terms of land release, the creation of infrastructure, and the like. I mean, one example of the way in which the Bellville Future project can support PRASA and its turnaround strategy is the fact that Bellville is going to have very significant populations of resident people that will live in future and in Bellville. Given our interest in increasing and maximizing the amount of affordable housing, the likelihood of those residents using the public transport and rail in particular is very high. So that will increase ridership. And ridership is a positive influence, therefore, on the fare box, which means that from a fiscal or financial sustainability perspective, Bellville and increased populations of resident people, etc., will translate into better ridership and the like. In turn, given that these type of developments offer opportunities for a broader mix of land uses beyond merely residential or merely office and the like, It also means that along a corridor, a rail corridor, we are encouraging boardings and alightings along the corridor, which equally has a positive influence on the fare box. So those two aspects in concert mean that through the planning process and implementation, we get to support PRASA in terms of that critical, important initiative for the city, and that's restoring the rail function. Partnerships are very important, as I say. The city can't do it alone. Each stakeholder with an interest in Bellville needs to come to the table at the right time with the right initiatives and so on in order to support the unlocking of Bellville. And here, in turn, National Treasury are very critical to the city. We rely quite significantly as a public body on the grant framework. Treasury also coordinate a lot of actions and the like between intergovernmental relations. So we can also work with Treasury in supporting engagements with SOEs and other spheres as necessary. But partnerships are critical to unlocking these types of opportunities.
So, on a human level, how can large scale master plans serve the needs of the users at the ground?
I think, in turn, again, economies of scale provide opportunities to go beyond the norm and to provide investments in amenity spaces and placemaking in particular, which are critical to giving Bellville identity or restoring its identity. I think obviously it has an identity. In recent times, Bellville has gone into a protracted period of blight and decline. And through investments in placemaking, public realm, and active utilization, increasing resident population. So there's natural surveillance, for instance, the investments in mobility infrastructure, which means that Bellville is a gateway into the Voortrekker Road corridor, which is the highest sort of concentration of blue and white collar employment opportunities in the city. So Bellville's importance in the metropolitan scape is very important. These master plans allow for investments in a broad range of infrastructure and housing and economic opportunities, which standalone projects typically don't provide. Bellville itself, as a metropolitan node, has a very significant sphere of influence across the metropolitan area. For instance, the retailing economy and the freight and logistics aspects of Bellville mean that its importance in terms of the metropolitan economy, and particularly for informal traders, is very high. And there's a whole nighttime economy which exists in Bellville, which is quite unique to the city. The investments that we make in terms of the public realm can and will also support informal trading and providing the informal sector with greater opportunities to leverage the footfall that passes through Bellville and accesses employment to support the livelihoods of the informal economy. Now, allied to that, obviously, is the placemaking strategy, which provides infrastructure to support those. We're also very fortunate in Bellville that we have a very significant green lung in the Elsie's Kraal, and investments in Elizabeth Park by the city recently, Jack Miller, allow us to create amenity opportunities integrated into the master plan and invest in infrastructure and amenity assets, etc., to add to that placemaking agenda. Making it more attractive for people to come and live and work and play, as we see around the globe.
Thanks, Frank. Zooming in on Bellville in a bit more detail, can you offer a brief overview of the vision for Bellville Future City?
So the city's vision for the regeneration of Bellville is a revitalized second metropolitan node, one which has larger residential populations of mixed income, with higher proportion of people living in the CBD. It also looks to promote the high levels of accessibility and enhancing that accessibility, particularly for public transport investments, and making Bellville more accessible. We are looking to increase the attractiveness of Bellville as a destination for public services, and therefore we're promoting a government precinct in partnership with the National Department of Public Works, for instance, and Infrastructure, who are quite a significant tenant in Bellville CBD currently, and in supporting their turnaround strategy and migrating from leased accommodation into owned accommodation. That also allows opportunities to recycle buildings and seize opportunities for conversions of office space into residential, and that's quite a significant market in our current sort of urban setting. So you can see that the master plan itself provides for quite significant opportunities to transform the urban space. Our vision also looks to exploit the locational attributes of Bellville, given its geographic proximity towards the center of the CBD, and therefore the mobility network which converges on Bellville, but also the fact that five of Cape Town's tertiary academic institutions are clustered around the Bellville CBD. That offers us quite exciting opportunities to exploit the knowledge economy, and we're promoting, as other cities around the world that are going through similar exercises of regenerating what they refer to as downtown environments through in part an innovation district. So exploiting the tertiary academic institutions which are co-located in Bellville and in the surrounding areas, there are quite exciting opportunities for us to promote investment in the CBD by generally public investment, and recognizing, of course, that our current economic circumstances as a result of COVID and as a result of a loss of confidence in the economy means that the public sector has an important role to play in directing public demand into what economists would refer to as a counter-cyclical recovery, Keynesian theory, where the public sector creates demand. And we, through this project, are seeking to exploit our partnerships with the National Department of Public Works, for instance, and the tertiary academic institutions, and then also the SOEs in PRASA and Transnet, who also have mandates to modernize and revamp their infrastructure, to create an environment where a lot of investment is clustered in a geographic location. We know that the private sector responds positively to those type of investments. We know that if we create the right enabling environments for investments in Bellville, that the investment will follow. International precedent certainly speaks to that.
Right, but I would imagine that the Bellville Future City vision is a very long-term plan. What improvement measures are being implemented in the medium and short term?
We recognize that the scale of investment that is necessary and that is possible means that this will be developed over a number of years. We also recognize that Bellville suffers from certain urban management issues, and the city's vision and conceptualization of the Bellville regeneration or Bellville Future City is one that in the short term focuses on area stabilization, addressing crime and grime related matters. The sub-council has reconstituted the area coordinating task team, which brings together a broad church of public parties in the city's control and beyond the city's control, SAPs, for instance, to start to target urban management. The city has prioritized Bellville and is putting quite significant resources through the Mayor's Visible Service Acceleration Program into the rehabilitation of Bellville in terms of urban management. A precinct manager is appointed and is responsible for coordinating a broad range of activities on behalf of the sub-council and the area coordinating task team. And those investments will, over time, yield an environment which is more conducive towards investment. The Bellville Future City medium to longer term implementation is a function of the master plan and the partnerships and the investments which are planned in Bellville to realize its full potential. So the vision for the city for Bellville is comprehensive. It recognizes that it's a combination of short, medium, and long-term investments, and it's ones that seek to ultimately attract greater private investment through giving them confidence in a broad range of aspects of urban development.
So, Frank, what exactly was the catalyst for the development of this vision?
So the catalyst for the development of the vision was a decision of council to prioritize Bellville and its regeneration as a catalytic project, a priority catalytic project of the city of Cape Town. It's committed resources, it's created my department, and it's galvanized the city in a transversal effort across multiple directorates and intergovernmentally to implement this vision. Resources have been deployed, both in terms of human resources and fiscal resources, in developing this vision over the last 3 to 4 years. The catalyst from a development perspective is ultimately focused around that intermodal public transport interchange, which is vertically integrated, and it releases a lot of land which currently is occupied by existing mobility PTI services, the GABS facility and the taxi rank, etc. So the core catalytic project identified in the IDP is the revitalization of the PTI. We've obviously developed that scheme as part of the Bellville Future City and extended our boundary as defined in the LSDF or the draft LSDF. We're excited to take that forward in the coming months through the public consultation process and garner inputs into this draft vision and amend it with the comments and the inputs that we receive through the particular processes, internal and external to the city going forward.
You've just mentioned that the city has launched a public consultation process. What outcome are you hoping to achieve through this process?
Yes, we launched the draft LSDF process for public comments on the 3rd of May. It's open for a period of 60 days. So the consultation process formally closes on the 4th of July. We are hoping to engage both internally with our line departments and externally, both with public sector stakeholders, but then also with the community, businesses, schools. We've got quite an extensive program of engagements planned through open days and also targeted engagements. We've also established a higher education forum, which engages between the city and those tertiary academic institutions. We also have a CEO forum where we engage with business, both the formal and the informal stakeholders in Bellville. And through those processes of engagement in public forums and more targeted forums, we're hoping to obtain more comments that we are hoping to incorporate into the draft master plan. The draft master plan, therefore, will be updated with those particular comments and therefore develop the master plan, which will ultimately then be presented to council and ultimately adopted as policy, spatial policy for the city, for Bellville CBD. The LSDF is also then, after that process, used to guide development and development applications. It also sets the city's vision and the collective vision of the community and the different stakeholders in Bellville for what they aspire a future Bellville to look like. So our draft LSDF provides an opportunity for various stakeholders and the public to engage around a future Bellville.
And Frank, finally, how can people get involved in the process?
We have quite an extensive program of public engagements over the next 60 days. Those include formal open days and meetings in Bellville, engagements with ward councils, which include a broad range of representatives on the various ward councils, so different ratepayer bodies, different friends of parks, for instance. We also have engagements scheduled with the Higher Education Forum and with the CEO Forum, which is representative bodies of the tertiary academic institutions and both formal and informal business in Bellville. So there's quite an extensive program of engagements that are planned. For those that are interested in downloading the document, they can go onto the city's website, the Have Your Say portal, and all the suite of information is available there. We're also going to have some road shows where we're going to be presenting the master plan and engaging with different stakeholders in discrete events. So we've got engagements with various schools, for instance, planned, amongst others. So there's quite an extensive plan of engagements that are planned for this consultation process over the coming days. We encourage and invite all different stakeholders and people that are interested in the future of Bellville to please access all of the platforms and the in-person engagements that we have planned for this. More details are available on the Have Your Say portal. The city's local implementing partner is the Greater Tygerberg Partnership, and the GTP are also going to be assisting us in terms of these processes and providing platforms for engagement and the like. They're also making their own press releases, etc., and will be assisting us in coordinating the logistics, if you like, behind planned events. We have a model, there's a scale model, which is also going to be left in public spaces for inspection, in addition to the documents. We have some video content, and there's also quite a significant amount of still images and computer-generated designed images, etc., that will allow people that participate in these processes to get the look and the feel for the future Bellville as currently sort of prepared.
Frank, Thank you very much for the discussion on Bellville Future City and the local spatial development framework Masterplan.
Dan, thank you very much for inviting me to share with you our thoughts on the process going forward for the Bellville Future City and the public consultation process. So thank you very much to you and your colleagues for this opportunity.